Hello everybody, Daniel Rothmill here again in the DevOps layer. Thank you for joining me. And if you're wondering about the purple hue, that's because we're talking about Terraform. And as I've said before, I really enjoy Terraform. So I've really enjoyed learning about Terraform, how it works, and getting my hands dirty. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this week's project for my DevOps Bootcamp at Level Up in Tech. We're going to do another Terraform project. So we've already done, launching a VPC previously. And this week, what we're going to do is actually something a little closer to a real world application. We're going to launch a 3-tier application architecture via Terraform Cloud. And we're going to do it using modules. So actually what I want to do first is I want to spend some time going through the code, explaining how it works a little bit, because it was one of the things that took me a while to understand, and I think if I can help you understand it, it'll help you when you walk through it. And I'll explain sort of where I'm getting this code from, some changes I made to it, and then how it all works together. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run this code in Terraform Cloud. So Terraform Cloud is obviously Terraform's sort of remote service that allows you to do remote state file storage. It allows you to run CI/CD with GitHub, with other CI/CD tools as well. And so we're going to see how it works in Terraform Cloud and how you would set that up and how you can run it and see how everything works that way too. All right, so first let's back up a little bit and talk a little bit about what a 3-tier architecture is. So a 3-tier architecture is a very common, application architecture that you find in a lot of applications. So basically what you have in the cloud is you have 3 layers of architecture to have an application. So you have a networking layer, and you have your application layer, and then you have your database layer. So those are the 3 layers. So the networking layer obviously allows your application to communicate with the outside world. Your application layer is obviously your application. And then your database layer is where your application stores the information. And so they all have to work together. So that's your basic 3-tier architecture. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing here on Terraform. And we're going to do it through AWS, and we're going to do it all in the same VPC. So what we're going to need is we're going to need a VPC, and we're going to need a couple of subnets, and we're going to need some EC2 instances with an auto-scaling group, and we're going to need a database, and we're going to need a load balancer. So all these things you'll see in the code, all this infrastructure being launched, and then all the required security groups and all that stuff to get it to all work together. And in the end, there'll be a web-facing application that you can check out when you get to the end. Now, I couldn't do this from scratch. I'm a noob. So there was no way for me to... I tried, honestly. I researched it, and I was like, whoa. So what I wanted to do was find a good walkthrough that I could go through, that I can take you through, to help sort of solidify all this stuff, because we're doing this stuff from the beginning, right? Presumably, you're new at this too. And so I found a really great walkthrough on a 3-tier architecture in Terraform in the book, Terraform In Action. I love books. I know a lot of people like virtual learning, but I love books. So the book Terraform In Action, let me show you here, is a really great book by Manning Press, and it's right here. So this is the page for Terraform In Action at Manning Press, Manning Books. It's by Scott Winkler. It's a great introduction to Terraform and how Terraform works in the real world, and he takes you through a bunch of things. One of the things he takes you through in chapter 4 is a 3-tier architecture on Terraform. So that's what I did. I went through the book, page by page, typed in all the code myself, and went through it and did it. And that's what I'm going to be doing today, but I'll explain some of the changes I had to make. Now, you can, if you want, go to the GitHub repo for the book. I highly suggest getting the book, honestly. If you're interested in Terraform, get the book. It's a great book. But this is the GitHub repo for that 4th chapter that takes you through the 3-tier architecture. So you can see... if I go back, this is chapter 4, and what he actually does is, so this is the complete code base, And then if you want to go step by step, he has the different corresponding to the book, the different listings in the book. He has, the code that he puts that shows up in the book, it's in there. So you could go step by step and sort of build it step by step if you want, or you can skip to the end and, just get the complete code base. And then also all of my stuff is going to be here on my GitHub and this repo, everything that I did that I'm going to take you through here in just a second. So that's what I did here. I used Terraform In Action. Scott Winkler. I feel like I know Scott pretty good now, even though we never met. Scott took me through building a 3-tier architecture, and I really learned a lot. So here's what we're going to do. Let me show you how this all works together. Because one of the things in this project was we had to use modules. My coaches didn't want us using resource blocks for everything, because obviously if you use resource blocks, and because I'm pretty sure it's somewhere near 40 different resources, that this is a very basic 3-tier architecture, is something like 40 resources that get launched in the end. And so you don't want 40 resource blocks in your main.tf. Like, that's a lot. So you can use modules to sort of shrink that down, make the code more dry, and condense everything and make it easier to read, easier to implement, easier to repeat. So that's what we had to do here, was use modules. And luckily, Scott's code in Terraform In Action uses modules, which is one of the reasons why I used his walkthrough. But it's important to explain how it all works. So in Terraform, when you don't have a bunch of different modules, you always have one module, and it's called the root module. And so that's the main files that you have in your working directory for any Terraform configuration. That's the root module. So your primary main.tf is in the root module. Your primary outputs are for the root module. Terraform.tfvars, your variables, versioning, which I'll show you in a second. All these things are in the root module. And then from the root module, you can call on other modules. You can call on child modules in order to spin up other infrastructure. So in order to do that, you create a folder called modules, and then you put the different modules, you separate the modules out in that folder. So within the root module, I have a folder called modules, and then the three different main modules that we used here. And then within those modules, sometimes we called on module blocks for our code. So in this case, we have an auto-scaling module, a database module, and a network module. And then within here, each one of these has their own main.tf, their own outputs.tf, and their own variables.tf. And the reason why you need these things is because this is how you get the modules to work together. That was the thing that was really frustrating me, is that I could build my own module, but I couldn't figure out how the heck to get my modules to use the information from the other modules, and how does it all work together? But going through Scott's walkthrough, Scott's demo, that helped me understand how all of it works together. So I want to walk through it to help you understand how it all works together. Okay, so here in our root module, we have our main.tf, which has the three modules that we talked about that are the folders, the corresponding folders here. We have our auto-scaling module, our database module, and our networking module. So those are our local modules. We call those the local modules because they're within the same directory. And then we have outputs. And then we have a provider.tf. You should always have a provider.tf to get this out of your main. So we just need the AWS provider. And then we have here in Terraform.tfvars, these are environmental variables, environment variables. And so if you were doing this locally, I'm leaving this file here, but if you were doing this locally, you'd want these environment variables, right? The namespace, which we called my 3-tier Terraform, and the region for AWS, which in my case is US East 1. Now we're going to actually, you'll see later, we're going to actually set these environment variables in Terraform Cloud rather than using the Terraform.tfvars file. That's one of the advantages to Terraform Cloud. You can set all those variables there. And then we have a regular variables file. So these are the different variables we need. We have a variable for the region also, and a variable for the namespace, because that corresponds back to this variable in the environment variable. And then we have a versions. So in our versions, so usually you would see this at the top of, you might see this at the top of a main.tf in the root module. We moved it in here to a versions folder, which is something that Scott showed me in his walkthrough, which makes a lot of sense to keep this stuff separate so it's easy to find and read and, understand, edit if you need to. The required providers are AWS. So here's the version for AWS that we're using, and Cloud Init, which is the HashiCorp provider. And so there's the version there. And then this block of code right here is how we tell the Terraform configuration that we're going to use Terraform Cloud. So in here, we're going to do a remote backend. The organization is going to be my organization on Terraform Cloud, which I'll show you in a little bit. And then the workspace that I'm creating on Terraform Cloud is going to be called 3-tier test. This can be anything you want. You'll create your own organization. You have your own organization also. So that's how all of the files look in our root module. So if we go back to our main, let's start with the networking module, right? And we're going to start from the bottom here, because the networking module is the basis for sort of the other modules. Because in the networking module, we're going to create our VPC, which is going to be the space where all of our resources are going to exist. They exist within the VPC. So we see here, we got the module. It's the networking module. The source for the networking module, it's a local path. So this is within this directory. Go to this folder, modules, and it's in this folder called networking. And the namespace is the variable we set here for variable namespace, which is, what did I say it was? My 3-tier Terraform. So, okay. So let's go to our networking folder, our networking module, and see what's in there. So in our networking module here in the folder, we have main, outputs, and variables. These are the 3 files that are the basis for any local module. Any module that you create locally on your machine should have these 3 files. Obviously, you need a main for the main code, and outputs so that you can output information that it can be used by other modules and by your root module, and then variables when you need variables. So let's take a look at the networking module. So, all right, we go to the networking module, and this is where we're going to build the VPC and the security groups and everything the VPC needs. So now what you see here is, so we have a data block for the availability zones for AWS. So this is asking for the availability zones in my AWS region, which we said before is US East 1. But here you see, let me move my face down here so you can see. There we go. Here you see another module. So what is this module? This module is the VPC module that is a remote module that's coming from the Terraform registry. Now, that means that what you're doing here, what we're going to do, is we are going to use AWS's module within our networking module, and it's remotely stored at the Terraform, the public Terraform registry. In actual production, at an actual job, more than likely, you will never do this. You won't use a module from a remote registry like AWS. And the reason for that is because versions change, things change about the modules, they could break stuff. You want to have control over, as much control over your module and your code as humanly possible. So therefore, what you might do is you might build your own VPC module and store it, on a GitHub or somewhere that your company owns. And then you would call that place to get your VPC module. But in this case, we're going to use the public module that AWS provides for a VPC. And so when you look that up, it has all the arguments that you can use and the variables that you can use in a VPC module. So this is where we're putting those in. So it's asking for the version. The name of our VPC is our namespace variable with hyphen VPC at the end, dash VPC at the end. The CIDR range, the availability zones. So it's going to take the data from the availability zones in my region. These are the private subnets for the VPC, the public subnets. Now, the reason why these aren't variables is because I only needed to type this once. If I was going to need this information again, then we create a variable, but we need to do that. And then creating a database subnet group, true, we need that because we're going to have a database, if you remember, in our architecture. We need a NAT gateway. And so then this is the VPC, right? So we're going to use the AWS module to create our VPC. Now, coming down here, we're going to use another module, and this is for the load balancer security group. You can see this module was actually created and registered by Scott, the author of Terraform In Action. So this is another remote module. So he created this module and registered it with Terraform, and then this is where you go get it. This is where Terraform, or this is where when we run it, this is where when we initialize the modules, this is where it's going to go get it from. And you can see here the VPC ID is going to be the module VPC, and we're going to get the VPC ID from the outputs. Okay. And then this is just the this is setting up the load balancer. This is setting up public internet access to the load balancer. Same thing. We got another module here for the web server. Again, the source is Scott's registry, the author's registry for this module, and we have a database security group. Same thing, right? So these are the rules for all of these different security groups. Again, he built these modules. Now, again, if you're in production, if you're working in an actual company, your company will have modules, or you will write your own modules. I didn't do that in this. I'm not there yet. So I couldn't do that here. So we're using publicly available modules. Okay? Now, the way that this works, so for these other modules, for example, the auto-scaling group, right? We have this is for the auto-scaling group for our web server. The question becomes, how do we get, and here's the module for the load balancer from AWS. So you can see this is a Terraform AWS module for the application load balancer. The question becomes, how do we get these modules to get the information from these other modules so that it all works together? And like I said, this was the thing that initially really frustrated me, was I couldn't figure out how to make them work together and pass the information between them. But in Scott's book, he really explains how this works. And essentially the way it works is you have to send the information, you have to what they call bubble up, the information that you need, that you want. You have to bubble that information up to the root module and then down into whatever other module needs it. And the way that we do that is with the outputs. So here you can see, so for the output for the security group, so if we go back to our networking module, the outputs for our security group is we're going to output the ID for the load balancer, the database, and the web server security groups. These are all the information that we need here. We're going to take that information and we're going to output it into the root module. And when we go back to the root module, now we can see when the root module, so here's our networking module, right? So now we can see for the auto-scaling group, when it needs the information that was generated by the networking module in the outputs, it goes here. So the auto-scaling module needs this information. It needs the VPC from our networking module. So the way we do that is we output it here, we output the VPC, and then we use it here in module.networking.vpc. So for the autoscaling group, now the autoscaling module is going to get its information from the networking module about the VPC. And it's also getting the security group information from the networking module. Like I said, this really frustrated me. And I know I'm not alone in this, in people learning Terraform, is sort of how the modules can work together. And once I read Scott's explanation, it made a lot of sense, right? You take the information from a module, you send it back to the root module, and then the root module can consume that information and use it and send it back to the other modules. So the information flows up and then it goes back into another module. So if you think about, you've got, the networking module here, and it has to get information to the auto-scaling module. What it does is it sends it up to the root module. The root module sends it into the auto-scaling module. And that's how they all work together. So you can see we did the same thing for the database module. The database module also needs the VPC, which is the information from the networking module. And it also needs the security groups from the networking module. And then for the auto-scaling group, it needs the information from the database module, because it needs the information about the database in order to do the proper auto-scaling. So in the database module, you can see here's the database module. I took out, so this is one of the things I changed, just as a brief side note here. Scott used a random password generator to create the database password, but now Terraform doesn't work that way, and so it wasn't working. Because I'm not trying to be secure with this, you can see right here, I put in password as password because I'm just going to spin this stuff up and destroy it. I don't need a secure database. So I was just fulfilling this information so that it'll work. In the real world, if you were going to do this, what you would do is create this password in your terraform.tf vars. You'd make it secret, and then that way no one could see the password, because this way it's going to be stored in the state file. But again, this is completely insecure, but we don't really care because it's only going to be up for a minute or two. Nobody's going to, have access to anything. But don't do this in actual production. Do it the right way. Have a secret variable and do it the right way. Which, if you watch my previous video on setting up a VPC in Terraform, I show you there how you can create your password, your username and password, and keep it secret. And actually, we're going to see how we do that a little bit in Terraform Cloud using environment variables. But again, so we're taking this information. So this is the database module. We're creating a database instance here, and then the outputs for the database. This is the outputs for the database configuration. It's got the username, the password, the actual database name, the host name for the address, and then the port. So all these things get output back to our main, and then they get consumed in the main here. So now, right here, the auto-scaling group has the database configuration there. Okay? I hope that I've explained that adequately. One other thing, we go back to our modules. In our auto-scaling group, we're using a configuration for the server that Scott created. You can see it here. So this is a YAML file with the configuration for the database. So if we see here in the load balancer, this is, again, a module from AWS. This is the load balancer. This is the auto-scaling group that we're going to create here. Here is a launch template for our web server. So this is the resource for, I should have went up to the beginning here. So the first thing in the auto-scaling group is we need an AIM instance profile. And again, this is a remote module, and then the data that we need is in this file, the cloud.init.config file, which is right here in the YAML file. This you just have to copy paste from. You do have to copy paste this from. This is from Scott's repo, because if this isn't right, it jacks everything up. But we just used his provided stuff. So again, here's the output for the DNS for the load balancer, so that we can get to our we can access the database on the web. Because it's gonna be open to the web, so we need this DNS in order to be able to type in the address to get to our application. And then these were just the variables, which you probably saw in there in the code. So that's how all of the code is laid out. And I just wanted to take, I know that was a while, but I wanted to take some time to explain how the modules work, because I think that's really important. And now that I'm able to understand a little better, that, walking through it, doing Scott's walkthrough really helped me a lot. So we have all the code is good. So now what do we do with Terraform Cloud, right? Because we said we were going to do this in Terraform Cloud. So let's go to Terraform Cloud and here we go. So we're going to go to Terraform Cloud. You can log in, create an account, log into Terraform Cloud, walk through how to log in and all that stuff. And then you'll go here to the you'll go here to your account, and you have workspaces, and then hold on. Okay, so I have my workspace here for 3-tier test that I created. So it gives you the code, which I put in, you saw before. And now what we need here are the variables. So we want variables from the terraform.tfvars. So we're going to add our variable in here. And if we remember, the variable we had was namespace and region, right? So we're going to go back and we'll do namespace. And that was my 3-tier Terraform. We will paste it in, save. We're going to add another variable for the region, US East 1. I really didn't need to look at that. Region, US East 1. Now we need environment variables. This is where we're going to put in our information for AWS, our security credentials. So what we're going to do here is, if we go to the Terraform Cloud documentation, you can see how you can create environment variables, and it tells you here's how you create an environment variable with your AWS access key and your AWS secret access key. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to pause the video so you don't see my keys, and then we'll come back and I'll show you when that's done. But where we do that is right in here. We do environment variables, add a variable, and so what we'll do is we'll take AWS access key ID, we will put it here, and then I'm going to put in this information, and I will pause this and I'll show you when I'm done. Okay, I'm back. I put those in. I forgot to mention to you, you can see here when you put in the variable, you have to click this little box here for sensitive, so that that information doesn't get revealed on the command line or anything else. So when you look here, you can see that it's sensitive. So now what we can do is, one other thing I forgot to mention. When I set up this workspace, I did this as a CLI-driven workspace, which means that everything's going to happen on the command line and show up in the workspace. There are other options. You can do it API, or you can do it through GitHub Actions, but we're going to do it from the CLI. So here's what's going to happen. When we go back to our code and we open up a terminal, I've already done a Terraform init, but if we do a Terraform apply, you can see what happens. So if I do Terraform apply, it's going to right here, running apply on the remote backend. Output stream will start here, and then you can cancel it. But if we go back to our workspace and we go to runs, we can see right here we have a run. This is the current run that was triggered by my Terraform apply. So this is just like looking at the terminal, right? So now we can see it's done everything. The apply looks good. The output is going to be the DNS name, and it's saying confirm and apply. So this is just like in the terminal. If I go back to the terminal, it's asking, do I want to approve it, right? Usually we would type in yes here. But now, because we're using Terraform Cloud, we go back, we do confirm and apply. And you can add a little comment to the apply. So we can say the plan looks good and confirm the plan, and now it will run it. So now we can watch again. Here it is. It is running our plan, and it is launching. It is spinning up all of our all of our infrastructure. So I am going to let this run. This takes a little while because the database creation takes a while. And like I said, it's somewhere near 40 resources. So it takes a little while. So I'm going to pause this, and then I will come back in a few minutes when it is hopefully done and we get a green message. And you can see how everything looks. But here you can go. Here you see we're in Terraform Cloud. You can watch it doing its thing here, and it tells you everything you're doing. It says it's it's running an apply, so you can see what it's doing there. All right, so I'll be right back. And we're back. So you can see here, it took about almost 10 minutes. But here are all the resources, 39 resources that were created. And here's that output, the DNS name. I'm actually going to take it from the terminal so I can copy paste it. There we go. And we will put it in here. And we should see the application. Sometimes it takes a little bit. There it is. So it's a little pet thing, like you can put in your pet name and it writes it to the database. But that's how it works. So if we go back to our, there it is. If we go back to our run here, so we can see that it finished. And if we go up here now, plan finished, and it shows us this was the plan and the apply finished, and it shows us the whole log. We can view the raw log. We can actually do that as a text file. So if we need to get, let me bring it in here. There we go. So this is the log in a text file. So here we could copy that DNS name here. But, you know, Terraform Cloud has a lot of cool features. And we can see our state. So here's Terraform state here in JSON. So, you know, it's all in here. We can download it. You know, Terraform Cloud is pretty cool. So now, if we go back to the terminal, let's do this. Let's go back to our runs. We'll go back to the run page. If we go back to the terminal and we do Terraform destroy, the same thing will happen. Whoops, let me spell that right. But I'm going to do auto approve this time because you've already seen how the approval works. So I'm going to do auto approve. We'll do this, Terraform destroy auto approve. It tells us again it's running in the remote backend. So if we look here, we wait a second, refresh it. There we go. The current run is a destroy run. I put that in red for you there. Very nice. And if we open it up, it'll do the exact same thing. It's going to show us again the log as it runs. And since it was auto approve, it's not going to stop here. It's just going to apply. It's going to keep going. So we can see, there it goes. I do notice that it does run, I guess because it's running a remote backend, it does run a little bit slower when you're doing Terraform Cloud. But there it goes. So I'm just going to let it go, and then everything will be destroyed just like it was applied. And so that's it. That's how I did a walkthrough of creating a 3-tier architecture using modules on Terraform and ran it in Terraform Cloud. So I hope that you found that valuable. This has been my longest video yet. I hope you learned something hopefully from my explanation of how the modules all communicate and work together, because I think that's really important to understand. And like I said, Terraform In Action, a great book. I highly recommend it because it will help you understand Terraform a little bit better. It's nice to be able to like read over things a couple times. That's what I had to do with the module, the way modules work. I read over it a few times and then it really started to click. And then doing this walkthrough really made it click. So thanks again for watching. And if you want to connect with me, as always, you can find me on LinkedIn, find me on GitHub, find me on Medium. I'm always around. I'd love to connect with more of you. So thanks a lot. And until the next one, everybody take it easy.